Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land, and tell Pharaoh to let my people go. Go down, Harriet Tubman, that is, way down in Plantation land, and tell them masters to let my people go, to let my people go, to let my people go. Please, Lordy, don't you leave me. Please, Lordy, don't you leave me alone. Please, Lordy, don't you leave me. Guide me on my way. The night is beautiful. So are the faces of my God's people. The stars are beautiful. So are the eyes of my God's people. Beautiful also is the sun. Beautiful also are the souls of my God's people. Kumbaya, my Lord, kumbaya. Kumbaya, my Lord, kumbaya. Kumbaya, my Lord, kumbaya. Oh Lord, kumbaya. Kumbaya, Gullah for come by here. Welcome to Boone Hall Plantation, one of the many, many plantations along what we call the Gullah Geechee corridor that gave birth to the Gullah Geechee people and the Gullah Geechee dialect. West Africa, Senegambia, Gambia, Sierra Leone, Angola, Liberia, Nigeria, Ghana. They brought them from West Africa to these parts strictly to work the rice plantation. Me no eat no beans, but out the rice. Me no eat no beans, but out the rice. Red rice, brown rice, wimpin rice, okra rice, hoppin' john, rice cake. Me no eat no beans, but out the rice. The West Africans knew how to properly irrigate that ground so that that rice crop could flourish. And them fellas, oh, they made the masters rich. Oh, yes, they did. Off of that product called Carolina Gold rice. Me no eat no beans without the rice. Gullah for I don't eat any beans without rice. In the Gullah kitchens of Charleston, South Carolina, and all along the Gullah Geechee corridor, dinner for us is not a complete dinner if rice is not being served. Now you can have your baked potato, mashed potato, macaroni and cheese, spaghetti, meatball, but if rice is not on the table, oh, dinner for the Gullahs is not yet ready. And when you burn and you scorch your rice, you probably throw it away. Well, we don't throw that away. We eat that. We call it a rice cake. And every New Year's Day, we have a special rice dish we Gullahs call hoppin' john. Now, hoppin' john for the Gullahs is actually field peas and rice. It's a little brown pea. Some people call it a cow pea. We eat this as a casserole with the rice, and we eat this hoppin' john dish every New Year's Day, along with a bowl of collard greens on the side for good luck, blessings, and prosperity for the upcoming new year. Now, some Charleston restaurants will try to get away with giving you the black-eyed pea and call it a hoppin' john dish, but you know the difference, because the rice will have a dark brown tint to it that takes the color off the pea. But rice, oh, that rice is still the #1 staple in our Gullah kitchens today. Now, when they brought us to this side of the ocean, we got dropped off. Oh, yeah. Dropped off all along what we now call the corridor. The Gullah Geechee corridor, starting way down there in Jacksonville, Florida, coming up to Brunswick and Darien, Georgia, where we got dropped off at Sapelo Island, St. Simon Island, Jekyll Island. When the ship got to Savannah, they brought us through a port of entry we call the Ogeechee River. When it landed in Beaufort, we got dropped off at Port Royal. From there, we ended up on Defusky Island, St. Helena Island, Ladies Island, and what's known today as Hilton Head Island. And when that ship got to this Charleston port, we got dropped off on this side of the river at a place called Sullivan Island, just a few miles from here, where Fort Moultrie and the marker stands today. Now that's where the fellas had to stay to be quarantined, cleaned up, before they put them on the auction block. Well, after emancipation, we're free. Most of the Gullah Geechees that didn't go up north towards New York and Canada, the rest of them ended up settling on all the different sea islands here in Charleston. John's Island, James Island, Wardenlow Island, Eddystone Island, Young's Island, Seabrook, Kiowa Island, all full of Gullah Geechees at one time, even Sullivan Island. If you travel up 17 north, about another 45 minutes from here, you get to Georgetown, South Carolina. Outside of Georgetown, there's Pawleys Island, Murray's Inlet, and then Myrtle Beach. And we call that entire stretch from Jacksonville, Florida, up the Atlantic coastline to Wilmington, North Carolina, and some parts of Virginia, the Gullah Geechee Corridor, the port of entry for the West Africans brought to these parts of the Americas in slavery. Now, I know you've seen some movies, you've heard some stories, you've read some tales, but every plantation had its own story. So did Boone Hall. This Boone Hall plantation at one time was just somebody else's piece of land. Major John Boone, an Englishman, coming all the way from Barbados, and bringing along with him from Barbados his own set of slaves. Well, he acquired portions of this property through what we call a land grant. Now, let me share with you how that land grant worked. During the 1680s and 1700 period, King Charles I was proprietor, very popular king, well-liked. But when he passed away, his son, King Charles II, came on board. Not too popular, not too well-liked. So to boost his popularity, what was he doing? Giving away land. Anyone coming to the new land and settling in, he was giving you 300 acres per family member, 300 acres per slave, and 300 acres per indentured servant. That's how our plantation system came into being. Now, Major Boone got his share, plus he got an extra 468 acres as a wedding gift after he married General Patey's daughter, Elizabeth Patey. That was gifted to them by the father-in-law. And that land ended up being 1,400 acres that was given to the Boone family. Well, now, they decided to put the slaves to work in 3 major crops: cotton, indigo, and rice. We call those 3 the cash crops. Now, they grew other crops, but those 3 brought the Boone family the most amount of money. And out of those 3, the bigger of the 3 during that 1680, 1700 period was actually the indigo. Now, indigo is a plant brought to the Americas from the West Indies, and this plant produces a blue and purple dye. Well, back in the day, them fellas would have to get up early every morning and collect urine by the bucketfuls. Yeah, urine. The urine back then was used in the fermenting process of that indigo dye. Now, Major Boone had 7 children. His daughter Sarah married a Rutledge, and John Rutledge, Major Boone's first grandson, actually became our first governor of South Carolina. Edward Rutledge, his second grandson, actually was one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. His son, Thomas Boone, is given credit for what you see to your right. We call it the Avenue of Oaks. He started strategically planting oak trees on both sides of the road, starting at the top of the gate. We're not quite sure how far he went down before he stopped, but the avenue was actually finished off by other plantation owners. Now, the plantation changed its hands several times. During the 1800s, the Hallback family came to Boone Hall. Mr. Hallback was from Germany. Coming to the plantation, he decided that he wanted to go into the brick-making business alongside the farming. So he sent for his 2 sons, his 1 brother. They all came over with families, and the Hallbacks and the slaves under the Hallbacks, they were putting out loads of brick off this plantation every year, providing brick for what stands today as many, many, many of our historic buildings, historic homes, historic churches, historic streets, scattered all across Charleston, other cities across the state, and outside the state of South Carolina. When we talk about original brick made by slave hands, all 9 of these brick slave cabins, and there were more, all this brick, handmade, pressed by slaves, right here from this plantation. The brick quarry was actually located on the back side of the plantation. Now, in this area at one time, there were actually 27 of these brick slave cabins. 3 rows of 9 cabins each. The other 18 have been taken down throughout the years because of the storms and deterioration. But in these 27 brick slave cabins, trust me, only selected slaves were chosen to live in the brick. Oh yeah. On the front yard of the master's house, you had to be trusted by the master, working for him in some special capacity. Boat makers, the carpenters, the iron fellows, the fellows that made the gates and things, butlers, maids, cooks, carriage drivers, all them fellows and their special skills, they were the privileged ones to live in the brick. But now, if you and your family were just regular old field slaves, meaning you worked the cotton, the indigo, the tomatoes, the corn, the cabbage, the rice, then you'd be living in what we call a board house. Your board house was just that, made of board. Half the size of this brick cabin, dirt floor, no window, no fireplace, and your board house would have been located way out in the field, a good distance behind the master's house. They call those houses shanties or quarters. Now, the oldest building on this plantation is located on the front yard of what we call the big house. The term big house was the term slaves used in making reference to the master's house, which is usually a mansion. So this house, when you go through the front gate, you take a left turn at the gardens, you will see a circular-shaped brick building, cone-shaped roof, dirt floor, no window, no fireplace. We call that building the smokehouse. That's where they kept master's meat fresh, because we had no refrigeration back in the day. And we did this thing called smoking the meat. We're still doing it in our outlying areas today. Our smokehouses are sort of built differently, but back in the day, this is how the smoking process went. The fellas would kill the wild game. Deer, turkey, quail, duck, geese, hog, pig. They'd skin it, clean it, gut it out, salt that meat down heavily. They would then cut up that salted meat and hang the heavily salted meat from the ceiling of that smokehouse. Start a fire in the ground. This fire would burn night and day, and at times they would put that fire out, fan that smoke, and that smoke rising up, consuming all that salted meat, we call it smoking, preserving the meat, keeping that meat fresh and ready for in time for master and his family needing to eat. The other building on the plantation is original brick, all is original brick, is the cotton gin house. That's the long building next to the parking lot. All of that is original brick, hand bricks made by the hands of slaves. That building was called the Cotton Gin House. Why? Because that's where they housed the invention by Eli Whitney, the cotton gin. And what was the purpose of the cotton gin? To help pull seed out of the cotton, which originally was done by slave fingers and hands. But that cotton gin sped up the process. That Cotton Gin House eventually became a restaurant and a gift shop. But after Hurricane Hugo went through a lot of damage, and it's just now being refurbished. Again, Gullah, a people, a dialect. Not only did the Hallbacks farm the land, not only did they work the brick, but they also planted pecan trees. This plantation at one time was the #1 retailer of pecans than any other business all over the world. Some of y'all might say pecans, I'm a pecan girl. Well, this plantation at one time had some 15,000, and I didn't say 1,500, 15,000 pecan trees standing on 3 separate pecan groves. And in the month of November of 1911, a mighty big no-name storm came through. They didn't start naming storms on our Atlantic coast until 1953, but that particular storm took down some 12,000 to 13,000 of those pecan trees, dropping the plantation to the bottom when it came to production. Now you can imagine how discouraged they were seeing all those trees on the ground after the storm. So what did? They sold the 3 groves, not the entire plantation. They sold the 3 groves to a lumber company. The lumber company cleared the land, made their money, kept it for a few years, but eventually the Hallbacks purchased those 3 groves for the second time, and then they sold the entire plantation. This plantation was once owned by a Russian prince, Dmitri. When he and his wife divorced, it was sold. This plantation was once owned by the Days family. Dr. Days was a local physician here in Charleston. And in 1935, Mr. Thomas Stone from Quebec, Canada, Canadian diplomat, retired naval officer, and he was a newlywed. Well, he and his new bride decided that they wanted to live on a plantation in the South, so they left New York and they traveled as far as south as Florida, visiting plantations going down, and on their way back up, stopped in here, fell in love with this plantation. And in 1935, Mr. Thomas Stone purchased Boone Hall, and one of the first things he did, started building the house that you see standing today. This house is the 4th house built on the plantation. Mr. Stone tore one home down prior to building this one. One was taken down by the storm in 1911, and the very first home was taken down by fire. Mr. Stone also built to my right the cotton dock. Down this short road is a huge shed. We call this shed the cotton dock because this is where they would bring all the cotton. Anything else that was grown, raised, made, produced on the plantation would have been brought here, packaged, and boated out to Charlestown. Now, outside this dock area sits a waterway. Back in the day, they called it the Wapachahonee Creek, named after Native American. But this creek actually flows into our Cooper River, which flows into our Atlantic Ocean. Well, in 1989, Hurricane Hugo comes through, blew down the original dock built by Mr. Stone, and this dock that you see standing today was rebuilt in 1992 under our former owner, Mr. Willie H. McCray. Mr. McCray's story. He was the Mr. Willie H. McCray the Jr. Mr. Willie Harrison McCray the Sr. purchased Boone Hall Plantation in August of 1955 as a gift to his wife. Mr. McCray the Jr., He was only 3 years old. And his one and only sibling, Miss Elizabeth, was 11 years old. Well, their mother kept the entire family in the mansion for 1 full year. 1956, she moved everybody to the second floor and decided to open up the first floor in the gardens to the public. Since then, it's history. Now, all 730 acres of Boone Hall Plantation is open up for public visitation. Unfortunately, Mr. Willie H. McCrae, the Jr., passed away April 2nd, about 3 weeks after we had shut down for COVID. But he is given credit for making sure that the second cotton dock was rebuilt and that these 9 remaining brick slave cabins were turned into many museums. History. Today, the cotton dock is used for weddings, corporate affairs, birthday parties, all kinds of special events. The last Hollywood couple to get married here at our cotton dock was back in February 2012, and that was Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds. But do take a walk down to the cotton dock. There are restrooms in the rear. Now, I'd like to welcome you all to Charleston, South Carolina, our beautiful city. Our beautiful city carries several names. People across the state call us the Low Country because we're basically at the bottom, and we're actually below sea level. We used to call ourselves, and people used to call us the city by the sea. These days, we're actually the city in the sea. Trust me, on any given day, high tide and clear skies, you can be up to your knees or your car window in water. That's how low we are. And I grew up in the downtown Charleston area, and we were always known as the Holy City because the word was out that we had churches on every corner, and I'm serious, that was close to being true. But scratch that, today we have hotels, bars, and restaurants on every corner now. So that's what it's looking like. But again, I'd like to welcome you all to Charleston, South Carolina. They call me Gullah Geechee. The Gullah Geechee term embraces my ancestry. I am a descendant of those West Africans who were brought to these parts of the Americas strictly to work rice. Not cotton, rice. But we also ended up working any plantation that needed our labor for their cash crop, be it cattle, tobacco, corn, maize, brick, indigo, whatever was being grown, raised in that plantation became our job. Well, there was a large group of us after emancipation that decided to move further north for better opportunities. But then there was an even larger group of us that remained along the coastal waters of South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, and they tagged us Gullah Geechees. Long story about how that name came about. But when you hear the Gullah part, the Gullah basically makes reference to our African-American culture, and then the Geechee term basically embraces our dialect. Now, the Gullah Geechee dialect here in Charleston doesn't sound like the Gullah Geechee dialect in Florida and Georgia. The Gullah Geechee dialect here in Charleston doesn't sound like the Gullah Geechee dialect in Georgetown, South Carolina, and Georgetown is only 50 miles north from where we are now. And the Gullah Geechee dialect here in Charleston doesn't sound like the Gullah Geechee dialect in Beaufort, South Carolina, and Beaufort is only 50 miles south from us. This Gullah Geechee dialect here in Charleston is a very, very fast-spoken, rhythmic dialect. It's a dialect where you will hear us changing blends of words, adding letters to words, taking letters away from words. We create sentences to say one thing and mean something totally different. We will engage you in conversation, laugh with you, talk about you all in one breath, and you have no idea what's going on. Gullah. Usually when we leave the state of South Carolina, we get questions like, are you from Jamaica? Are you from Barbados? Are you from the West Indies? Why? Because our languages carry on the flavor of our Caribbean brothers and sisters and our African brothers and sisters. So now, repeat after me. Come ya.
Come ya.
Bin ya. Come ya.
Come ya.
Bin ya. Those of you who are new to Charleston, first time as we Gullahs call you guys come ya. Meaning you coming here for the first time. Coming here, come ya. That's how we say it. So what does that mean? Let me give you a conversation. Look here, gal. There's a whole bunch of come-yas in Charleston. Them fellas all over the road that they don't know where they're going. So you better watch out with your car, because them come-yas all over Charleston. Gullah. Come-ya, meaning you're coming here for the first time. But I'm a bin-ya. Bin-ya for a long time. Don't have to ask no questions. Gullah. So how do we know you come-yas? You get lost. Ask a lot of questions. That's how we know you are come-yas. Now, take your TH blends. When you enunciate, you do it so properly, you say this, that, there, them, then, those. In Gullah, when you hear us speaking, you hear us drop the TH and add the D. This, that, there, them, then, those. You say river, you hear Gullah say river, over the river. You say vegetable, you hear Gullah say vegetable or vegetable. You say vinegar, Gullah says vinegar. You say mouth with the TH ending, Gullah says mouth. That's what you fellas plan on greasing your mouth on a day for supper. Greasing your mouth. What you plan on eating, tasting a day for supper. Now, we got this rude thing where we like to tell people to shut up. Doesn't sound good. And Gullah, we just say, man, tie your mouth. Tie your mouth. That's all we say. Tie your mouth. Gullah. So now, just to share with you how we can talk about you in company, you have no idea what's going on. What's your name? So your name?
Amy.
Amy. If I took Miss Amy home to meet my family, this type of conversation would go down. Miss Amy would understand some things. They'd be cutting up and telling her jokes, and she'd be laughing all over herself until we got to talking about her in Gullah, and she'd have no clue what was going on. So here goes the conversation. Granny, I met a nice woman. You said woman? Gullah, we just dropped it down. Granny met a nice woman on a plantation named Miss Amy. Granny, please, see if we can find some education for Amy for greasy mouth. Granny, watch out for Amy now. She's a nice gal, Granny. But they tell me say hunch on the patience. Yeah, I just called her a thief using those words, that's all. I said he hunch on the patience. Her hand is short of patience. What does that mean? That means she's quick to pick up stuff that don't belong to her. That's what it means, short of patience. So what would happen to Miss Amy? Not a thing. Granny would make sure Miss Amy had a belly full of Southern Gullah grub, but while Amy was rolling around the house, everybody's eyes would be on Amy's hands, making sure Amy wasn't leaving with anything she didn't bring. God bless you, Miss Amy. Thank you so much. My stage name is Geechee Gal. I sing with a group called the Plantation Singers. So apropos. We are an a cappella group. We've sang in Korea twice. We sing across the United States. We do weddings, we do bar mitzvahs, birthday parties, corporate affairs. We do the New Orleans style march from one venue to another. You name it, we do it. But today, if you're still hanging around Charleston this weekend, you can catch us at the Hall's Chop House in downtown Charleston. We do a gospel brunch every Sunday morning from 10 to 1, and that's the Plantation Singers. We sing plantation work songs, we sing plantation spirituals, we sing songs that our people couldn't put words to that we did. We put words to the moans and groans that we knew that our people experienced. So when you talk about a spiritual and a hymn, there's a major difference. Spirituals come right out of your mouth of how you're feeling at a particular time. Now we have one song we sing as a spiritual that you have sung in a lot of our churches, and it goes like this. Come on in the room. Come on in the room. Jesus, him my doctor, and he write up all of my prescriptions, and he give me all of my medicine in the prayer room, in the prayer room. Gullah, Gullah, a people, a dialect. On the plantation, you had to be about the master's business, not your business. You had to be working. Carrying on conversations, not. That was a no-no. So if you wanted to meet and gather and discuss anything, you did it 4-day clean in the morning. What's 4-day clean? 4-day clean meant before sunrise. You would go to the brush areas, meet and gather, discuss business, do your circle dances, ring shouts, pray master don't find out, and anything you needed to share with the outside plantation slaves who didn't get to come to the meeting, you would put it in a coded message through a song. So if you woke up one morning and you happen to hear them fellas holding on to this one song all day long, singing and humming the same tune, oh, you better believe it was a message. Wade in the water, wade in the water, children, now wade in the water. Gods are gonna trouble, gods are gonna trouble, gods are gonna trouble the waters. Message, there was gonna be an escape that night. It was gonna happen by, near, through the waters. Why the waters? Well, when they set the dogs after you, and they would, they couldn't pick up the scent, but you still had to fight the gators and the snakes. Gullah, going through the water. Gullah. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Home where? To freedom. What was coming? That night, the Underground Railroad, we call them professional foot escapers. Anybody wanted to get off that plantation, we waited on those Underground Railroad folks to come through and lead us off the plantation. If you wanted to go, you just need to be ready when they came through. Gullah, a people, a dialect. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land, and tell Pharaoh to let my people go. Go down, Harriet Tubman, that is, way down in plantation land, and tell them masters to let my people go. Harriet Tubman was called Little Moses. She made some 19 trips back south to pick up over 300 slaves to freedom. Gullah history played out on the plantation. September 1st, 1862, President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. But the Emancipation Proclamation wasn't formally processed until January 1st, 1863. And the Emancipation Proclamation only freed those slaves in the 7 Confederate states: South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, and Texas. It wasn't until the 13th Amendment of 1865 that slavery was formally and fully abolished across what was then the United States of America. If you cruise to downtown Charleston via Highway 26, the first exit you'll get to will be the Rutledge Avenue exit. 4 lights down, you make a right turn, and at that stop sign, you see the Citadel Military College. Outside the Citadel Military College sits a circular park. We call that park today Hampton Park, but the original name of that park was the Washington Racecourse and Jockey Club, which eventually became the prison yard and the prison graveyard for those fallen Union soldiers and the slaves that fought alongside those fallen Union soldiers. May 1st, 1868 was our first unofficial, what we call Decoration Day Parade and Celebration. What happened on May 1st, 1868? Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of newly freed slaves, their families and children, Northern missionaries and Federalists marched around that park, celebrating emancipation and decorating the graves of those fallen Union soldiers and the slaves that fought alongside them. Every Memorial Day weekend in the South, in our areas in South Carolina, not only do we celebrate Memorial Day, but we call it Decoration Day because they still go around decorating the graves of not only the fallen soldiers, but anyone in their family who left this side and went on to heaven. So that's what we call Decoration Day, decorating the graves of those fallen family members and the fallen military people in our families, Gullah. Now, outside this plantation sits stands of our beautiful wares. We call them the sweetgrass baskets. I think Miss Mary's gone for the day. Every day we have a weaver. In our sweetgrass baskets, you find several materials. The darkest straw you see is called the bulrush. Bulrush is the same material that went into making Moses' basket, and we pull the bulrush from right out here in the marsh. Now, also in our baskets goes the sweetgrass. The sweetgrass is a very soft straw, very pliable, softer than a broom straw. And we pull those two from this marsh area. It's getting harder and harder now to get those materials because of development, but we have a lot of guys who get on those bicycles and don their boots, and they'll pull those straws and make sure that the women get these straws and they sell them so that they can continue the work in the baskets. Now, we also add the pine needle, and the final wrapping in the base of the basket is usually done with our palmetto leaf. The palmetto tree is our state tree here in South Carolina. Now, when you see our women, men, and children weaving, you will see them using one instrument. Back in the day, they called it a nail bone. Why? Because back in the day, they were actually using the rib bone of a pig or a cow. And then they went to the use of a nail. Beautiful baskets like these. Those little small, you just wouldn't believe what those little instruments could do. So now they went from that. Today, our nail bone is actually the bottom part of a tablespoon, teaspoon, or fork. They weld off the handle, and it's about this size. They'll take the end of that handle, flatten it, file it until it almost looks like an arrowhead. And that one little arrowhead instrument creates baskets this size, even larger, even taller than I am, as small as earrings, as unique as baby carriages, and I said baskets as tall as I am with the beautiful elephant ears. In the downtown Charleston area, you will see our basket ladies in the market, and also at the Four Corners of Law, that's Broad and Meeting Streets. In Washington, D.C., at the Smithsonian and the African American Museum, many of our baskets are on display. Beautiful, beautiful baskets. And they're actually in museums all over the world. So now, out here at Highway 17, you'll see the basket stands in front of their homes, in front of their churches, some set up in the parking lots of our shopping centers. Feel free to stop by and purchase a basket. But your cheaper baskets are usually purchased here in the Plantation, and I think Miss Mary's gone for the day. But outside the Plantation is your next best. But if you decide to go to historic downtown Charleston, be prepared to pay historic money for your historic baskets, all right? You know, that's what they do when you go to the historic side of town. But nevertheless, they're all beautiful, beautiful, and special wares. Now, on your way back, the very last building is called a praise house. Why is it called a praise house? Because that's what some of the plantation owners did. They built churches. Some plantation masters weren't comfortable with their slaves worshiping alongside them, so they built a separate facility for their slaves. Some plantation owners had no problem with their slaves worshiping along with them. When we did, our position was always to sit in the balcony or in the far rear of the church. So now, after emancipation, when we went into building our own communities, We didn't build churches. We built praise houses, replicas of what we have on the plantation, some on a larger scale and some on a smaller scale. Today we have a Gullah Bible. It's called the D-E-N-Y-E-W, the New Testament. This particular Bible was transposed in Gullah during the early 70s through Wycliffe Publishers and a few specialists in the Gullah dialect. So in closing today, I'd like to share with you the Our Father prayer as written in Gullah. In this Gullah Bible, you have the Gullah language in the center paragraphs, and in the right and left margin, you have the English explanation of the scriptures, of the Gullah scriptures. So now, I'd also like to recommend another book before closing, and it's called Barracoon, B-A-R-R-A-C-O-O-N. My daughter-in-law is an English professor, and she loves to give books for gifts. So this book she gave me a few years ago was called Barracoon. Read it in 2 days. The book tells the story of the last illegal slave ship that left the United States, went to Africa, picked up slaves. They dropped those slaves off outside of Mobile, Alabama. And in 2016, there was a group of African-American divers who called themselves Divers for a Purpose. They found the Clotilda burnt out in the waters of Alabama, but the story centers around Cujo, the last living of those slaves, whose desire was always to get back to Africa, but never did. But she interviews him, a painstakingly weeks and months of interviews with him, but to hear him share his story about his life in Africa is just so profound. You got to read the book. It's called Barracoon. Zora Neale Hurston is the author. She was an anthropologist, African-American anthropologist, and she wrote 5 books. Her bestseller was Their Eyes Are Watching God. You can pick up that book from your local library, from Amazon, and here we have Barracoon here at our bookstore. And the Bible is here at our bookstore. So if you go to our Butterfly Cafe, you find a lot of reading materials. So here, go in closing, the Our Father prayer as written in Gullah. We, Father, one day in heaven, let everybody on your name. We pray soon you're going to rule over the whole world. Whatsoever thing you want in this world, let them be so. Same like in heaven. Give it the food we need this day and every day. And please, Lord, forgive we for the bad thing we do to other people. Same as you forgive them other people for the bad thing they do to we. Amen. Gullah, a people, a dialect, birthed out on the plantation. Slavery. That's all right. Slavery. That's all right. Slavery. That's all right. That's all right. Long's my soul got a seat up in the kingdom. That's all right. Talk about me as much as you please. The more you talk, I'm gonna bend my knees. Long's my soul got a seat up in the kingdom. That's all right. Your story. My story. Our story. Your story. My story. Our story. Your story. My story. Our story. His story. History. The night is beautiful. So are the faces. So are the many, many blessed faces. Faces. So are the many, many blessed faces. Faces. Blessed faces. Faces. Blessed faces. So are the many, many blessed faces. Faces. So many blessed faces. Faces. Faces of all, and I mean all, of my God's people.
Genesis chapter 11 verse 10 explains the genealogy of Shem. Shem was a black man in Africa. If you repeat this fact, they can't laugh at you. If you repeat this fact, they can't laugh at you.